Now, to many people, when they go into journalism, sport's just about the best thing they could ever do. But how's this for topping it? Being a food critic, spending your time going around, trying food, not saying who you are, and writing what you like. Well, Paul Fullford is one such person. Paul, good morning to you.
Good morning,
We
Bob.
welcome you today because it is National Curry Week. Are curries high on your agenda of eating?
It's my default setting. When I can't be bothered to cook, I go to my local curry house and have virtually the same dish every week.
We will talk about what it is you eat and what it is, but the Indian cuisine has taken this country over, hasn't it, big time?
I think one of the fascinating things for me about Indian cuisine is it's the place that I introduce. They're the sort of restaurants where families can go. And I think so many children are introduced to eating out at Indian restaurants that it's fantastic. It's made eating out kind of commonplace in this country, where once it was a rare occasion.
Did you have a curry last night?
I didn't. I cooked
No.
at home last night.
And you didn't have a curry last night. Have you had one so far this week?
I cooked one on Monday night, a vegetarian one.
Yeah. How long have we had National Curry Week? I mean, is it fairly new?
I think it's a fairly new one. I couldn't be specific about that, but I think it's one of the many national event weeks that we have, and it's great to celebrate such a central part of Britain's cuisine.
What got you into eating curries then?
Oh, their accessibility and the fact that they were tremendous value for money and incredibly tasty. And as a young man, I mean, what's better than going for a pint and then a curry afterwards?
Somebody told me the other day that, of course, Birmingham is famous for its Baltis. And he said it was, and to be fair, he is Indian himself, and he said that the food was not authentic and that the Balti was the worst thing that ever happened.
I think he's probably overstating the case. I think there are some terrible Baltis around. I think there are still some wonderful authentic places to eat and have Balti. I think that there's a similar food in Pakistan and Bangladesh, but that it's been amended for Western palates over here. And I think, unfortunately, with the popularity of the Balti 15 or so years ago, restaurants undercut each other on price, and the quality went down because the quality of ingredients went down.
Well, what's the history then? I mean, where did the Balti come from?
It started in the Sparkbrook, Small Heath area of Birmingham many years ago, probably back in the 1970s, and it was a kind of an approximation of similar dishes that would have been cooked back home on the Indian subcontinent.
And was it, by its very nature, was it a fairly cheap dish to do? Was that part of the appeal?
It was cheap and it was easy to eat. It was, it was served in the bowl in which it was cooked. So it was, it was fantastically easy to prepare, and it could be prepared in great quantities.
And of course, anybody who's been to that area in Birmingham, it is very basic, isn't it? It comes in a big bowl, and they give you a huge naan, and you dip in and eat it. There's no knives and forks.
Absolutely,
or anything like that.
Absolutely, although a lot of the restaurants have become more upmarket these days, but there's still authentic ones. There's one that I use on Moseley Road, which is still, the plastic tablecloths and the knives and forks of such cheap quality they bend when you use them.
But the food is obviously good.
The food is fantastic. The lamb kebabs are the best I've had.
Because I noticed you said a little earlier, you said that when you go, you have the same thing every time.
To my local one, I do.
Really?
I always have shish kebab and then a bowl of dal with a roti.
And are you going and they just say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Paul, sit down," and they don't even ask you?
I think they usually say a pint of Cobra, sir.
Yeah. And they know the food.
They know the food.
What gave you the taste then for Indian food?
I love. I mean, it started years ago. My mum, I can say this, she's dead now, so I won't offend her, was a terrible cook. So I insisted that she bought Vesta ready meals, and that was the first curry I ever had.
Yeah. And compared to what you eat now, presumably you don't think it actually tasted anything like
it. I mean, looking back, they must have been dreadful things. They really must, with the dehydrated ingredients and so on.
Is it the fact that it is still relatively cheaper and it's very tasty? Is that what drives us to curries?
I think it is, and I also think they're incredibly family friendly. I mean, I have two sons, and the first restaurants they visited were curry houses, and I think the same is true of many families. You can buy them little starters of pakora or samosa, and it's a fantastic meal for a
And of course, you walk around the shelves, not in a specialist supermarket, but any supermarket, And there's just stacks of the stuff, isn't there? Now?
Absolutely, and it's a fairly easy thing to cook at home. You know, I mean, as long as as long as you're a fairly competent cook, you should be able to rattle up a decent curry.
And are you celebrating National Curry Week by having a curry this weekend?
I'm actually celebrating it by cooking a curry for my wife and her friends on Friday.
Well,
I'm not invited to the meal, by the way.
Oh, no. Sometimes with events like this, everybody rushes off to it, but I suppose particularly Friday and Saturday nights, everybody fills the Indian restaurants anyway, don't they?
They're the busy nights for all restaurants, and Indian restaurants are no different, especially the suburban ones. People have worked a week and they think, oh, can't be bothered to cook, let's go out for a beer and a curry.
If the Balti is not quite as popular as it once was, what's taken its place?
I think one interesting thing about Indian restaurants, and I think Italian and Chinese restaurants could learn from this, is that they've reinvented themselves time and time again. So you have places opening like Lausanne, which is very upmarket, fine dining Indian food, and you also have this wave of Indian food in pubs. So a lot of the big pubs that were really struggling have been taken over by mainly Sikh Punjabi people and turned into grill houses, which are fantastic, brilliant value, more food than a wee man like I can usually eat, but wonderful. I love those places particularly.
And there being little areas in Birmingham, I mean, Sparkbrook we mentioned earlier, we know there are a lot there. Moseley, which is another big area, and further out, when you get around, sort of Lye and Stowbridge are a lot. So,
Yes.
so these little pockets, aren't there, where you will see a whole road and there's about 4 of them.
You can almost turn up in these areas and not decide until you get there which one to visit, which one looks, the best. And I think that's a fantastic thing. I think we need more hubs like that.
Is there any way of, apart from actually going and trying it, if you read the menu, would you say, no, I'm not going in there and I'm going in there?
I mistrust menus that are too long. I mean, it's hard enough to cook a dozen dishes right, to cook 112 dishes well is an impossibility. So I tend to look for smaller menus.
As a food critic, do people not get to know who you are and what you look like, or do you go in disguise?
I don't wear a wig and stilts, no, but they do. But I don't think that, simply because I'm there, you can turn a bad restaurant good. I think, quality will shine through whoever's there.
Have you ever, do you think, gone in and you've seen them nudge each other and said, it's that bloke from the Birmingham Mail, and they've tried a little harder, or
I think
given you a
sometimes
clean tablecloth?
I think sometimes they've trimmed the bill for me,
Really?
or added extras, which can be a bit embarrassing. And I know at least one restaurant has circulated my picture to its waiters to say, watch out for this guy.
Really? Yeah. When you go in as a food critic, are you any different to if you were going in socially?
No, I'm just a very lucky customer. I'm a customer who gets to write about something that he enjoys doing. I'm probably more experienced than many people who eat in restaurants, but that's simply because I'm a glutton. I have no particular advantages over the ordinary customer.
Yeah.
Do I like it or don't I like it? It's bottom line.
Yes. I mean, as a journalist, how did you become a food critic then?
I worked on news for most of my career, and about 20 years ago I launched a recipe column for the Birmingham Mail, where I worked at the time, in which I visit a restaurant kitchen and be taught to cook a dish.
So you got a love of cooking anyway?
Got a love of cooking, and then 2 years later the guy who was restaurant critic retired and I filled his boots.
Did you go with some trepidation into it sometimes? Did you think, this... Because they'd obviously got no idea you were going to turn up, had they?
The restaurants? No. I mean, I've had some, fairly disastrous meals in places and some fairly brilliant ones. One of the great blessings is to watch Birmingham blossoming as a gourmet city. I mean, 15 years ago it was a backwater. Today it's probably one of the best in the country.
And I suppose you mentioned earlier that if you see a really long menu, you think, no, maybe not for me. And then people, I suppose, get slightly now, are they all curries, because we're talking about National Curry Week, because it's kind of all-embracing title, that, isn't it, which covers pretty well any Indian food. It
is. I mean, curries, Indian friends would say curries don't exist. We know them as a kind of a stew. Tandoori is entirely different. It's a grilled sort of food, usually meat, which is treated in various spices and often yogurts, and put in a in a clay oven to cook at a very high temperature. And Balti is a dish that's served in a metal bowl, as we all know.
Apart from National Curry Week, in the time we've got at our disposal, let's just talk about one or two other things as a food critic, because obviously you've gone through the whole gamut of them, and they keep changing it. I mean, when Nouvelle Cuisine came around, did you think, have they remembered to put it all on the plate, or were you happy with that?
I was happy with that. I mean, I must admit, I do tend to follow fashions. I like the modern trend towards more hearty food. I think it was a bit of Emperor's New Clothes with Nouvelle Cuisine, where everything was dressed in raspberry vinegar and pared down. But it played a part. It made us look at those heavy cream sauces and buttery sauces that weren't great for our heart and our waistlines.
Better from a health point of view.
Better from a way, and also from a taste point of view, it allows us to taste more the rest of the ingredients. You know, the chicken should speak for itself rather than be smothered in cream.
Do you recoil and want to run away screaming when you see the plethora of fast food shops and baguettes and pies and heaven knows what else?
It breaks my heart when I walk through, you know, sort of central shopping areas and see people crowded into some of the high street chains, and then 5 minutes walk away is Chinatown with some great little independents. It breaks my heart that people don't bother to walk those few hundred yards and eat at those places instead.
I mean, do people do it for convenience?
Convenience and fear, I think. I think, you know, that they know what they're getting at the high street chains, whereas if they see a little independent place, perhaps with apparently unusual dishes on the menu, they may be a little scared.
So as a nation, are we not quite as discerning about our food as we maybe like to think we are?
I think we are discerning, or increasingly discerning, but I think we started from a very low level compared, say, to the French and the Italians and the Spanish for that matter, and I think we're getting there. I think we're in a better position than we've been ever before, certainly in a better position than we were 20 years ago. This
is a totally random guess, but am I thinking that French food is possibly your favourite?
No, Spanish food is my favourite.
Really?
I think I've had, I mean, it's at the cutting edge at the moment. I mean, there's been some fantastic innovations in Spain.
We mentioned briefly about the whole food scene in Birmingham. I interviewed Sir Albert Ball, leader of the City Council, recently, and he said when he first came to Birmingham and first was involved in politics and, of course, at university, he said unless he took potential clients, investors, whatever, to the Plough and Harrow on the Hagley Road, there was nowhere else to take them. Is that right?
That's about right, yeah. I mean, there might have been one or two Indian restaurants, maybe a Greek restaurant, an Italian restaurant, but largely Birmingham was a culinary backwater in those days. The interesting thing is that the guy who ran the kitchen at the Plough and Harrow was Andreas Antona, who now is chef patron at Simpson's in Birmingham and has trained so many great chefs, and I think is the most influential figure in Birmingham's food scene.
It's going to be a bit of a commercial, but there are some pretty good places to eat in and around Birmingham now, aren't there?
Oh, there are some fantastic places. I mean, across the range, my favourite Indian would be Lasan. I love going to the Michelin-starred restaurants. All of them, they've all got their own qualities. Opus is a great restaurant. Pure Bar is a fantastic place for a Scotch egg and a pint of a lunchtime. And we're lucky, we're blessed.
And in your neck of the woods, of course, there's Carter's, which is hugely popular as well.
Carter's, run by a fantastic young couple who deserve all the success they can get.
Is it just restaurants in Birmingham? Are there no sort of nice hotels or places outside of the city where you can get well fed these days?
Yes, there are. I mean, there's the Cross in Kenilworth is a Michelin-starred pub. There's the restaurant at the Hampton Manor Hotel on the edge of Solihull, which I think deserves to get a Michelin star. If you wanted to travel further afield, there are many good restaurants.
We've almost got a bit of a food obsession now, haven't we? I mean, I'm thinking that not so very long ago, television, every other programme was a DIY programme. Then it was a gardening programme. Now it's a food programme.
That's right, and especially baking. I mean, we all seem to be mad on baking.
The Great Bake Off.
That's right, that's right.
What's your take on that?
I enjoy it. I really do.
That's a guarded response, isn't it?
I shouldn't enjoy it, but I do, and I watch it. I'm an avid follower of it.
Do you feel guilty then about enjoying it? Is that what you're saying?
I do. I think it's fairly, it's formulaic and it's all a bit silly. But they do have personalities. and the dishes look fantastic. I'm a terrible baker, so I admire their skills, by the way.
And of course, I mean, reality television in every way, shape and form has just kind of taken over, hasn't it, everything? And obviously it was going to get to food at some point. So, National Curry Week, and you are going to be cooking, you said, for wife and friends. Can you let us in, without spoiling it for her, on what you're going to be cooking?
I'll cook an aubergine and chickpea curry, probably in coconut milk, which should be very tasty. I think Indian food is one style of cuisine where meat really isn't necessary. I think vegetarian Indian food is absolutely wonderful.
It's been nice to talk to you this morning, Paul Fullford. Thank you so much. National Curry Week. And of course, as a food critic, you have your own blog, don't you, that people can find?
I do, paulfulford.co.uk.
Nice and simple.